my name's Lindsay and welcome to my living room. Today we're going to paint this Serene Lake scene. We're going to do just a few little different kind of techniques to get through that. We've got some blending on canvas. We're going to do some light fluffy little clouds and then a little bit of streaking if you're ready for that. When I do these, I'm going to use very minimal supplies and I'm not going to use the best supplies that I have either. So they're sort of middle of the road everything. When I do this, I am going to use a 16 by 20 canvas. But what I want to throw out there is before I did this on the canvas, I first painted it as a little thumbnail on a piece of paper. So you can kind of see I liked what I was doing here. I kind of had an idea of where I was going to go and then I painted it. What I would suggest is, because I'm going to be moving sort of swiftly, I suggest that you paint it on a smaller piece of paper or a piece of canvas, something that you know that you're going to repaint. So I've got this one here, but I have a canvas that I'm going to use. I'm sort of repurposing these canvas because I'm running out. So this is a canvas that I painted over. I'm sure you can kind of, maybe I'm going to turn it upside down. You can kind of see the painting that's below it, but once I get this other painting on top of it, you won't be able to see what's going on underneath really. But when you're doing your own paintings, if this is something that you want to paint on your wall, start out with a nice fresh canvas. Sometimes it's a good tip just to kind of cover it with a quick coat of white paint, especially with this one. It stops it from drying out so quickly. It's also easier to blend when you've got a coat of paint on there, so it's not just soaking up into that canvas. So this one here obviously has a coat of paint over it. If you were working with just a regular blank canvas, it's probably going to dry a little bit quicker. So that's my kind of workaround around that. Give it a nice coat of white. So this is my canvas here. It's a reused 16 by 20. I'm going to use two brushes today. So these are not the best brushes in the world. I have a very large brush for cover and then a very small brush for details. Even my small brush isn't the smallest. It's kind of frayed out at the ends. I actually use these for my in real life paint parties. So they've been used quite a few times by now. But they're going to work great for today. I am going to use this nice used rag here. So every time you put your brush in the water, you're going to want to dry it off a little bit. I've got a rag. It's something that I use so I can kind of reuse it. But you can use paper towels, all that kind of stuff. I have a reused mason jar. You can kind of see where I fill the water up to. I'm going to start with a nice fresh amount of water. Big question is always when to change your water, and that's the best answer is whenever you want. Anytime you're going from a dark color into a light color, that's the best time to wash your wash brush water out. That makes sense, right? It's a good time to change your water if you're going from a dark color and you're going right into a lighter color. Say if I were to do some highlights after the blue. But today's painting is not so, we're not mixing a whole lot of colors. So I'm not going to change my water out at all. And the way that I'm going to paint these are with acrylic paints. So I've got 4 colors that I'm going to use today. A whole bunch of white, a little bit of yellow and red, and some blue. I'm not going to use black today, but I do have it on hand. So I've always got jugs of paint and I've got some on hand for if I need any extra paint as well. When I use these paints here, they're going to get kind of dirty. So that's why I have them here. And then I've also got an extra palette. I've already used it to mix colors on. So I've got extra palettes if I need some off to the side. I've got my canvas, I've got some fresh brushes, and it's time to get started. So what we're going to do today is sort of start in the back and work our way forward. Usually I would say I want to find a horizon line and decide on my sky versus the water. But this is what's really cool about this one is it's all sort of going to be one thing. So there's not just a sky and water in this first part. So what I'm going to do for this is to get that nice sort of light, fluffy, yellow, salmon-y red mix is I'm going to start out with my big brush and I'm going to quickly cover this with white. So before it dries, I want to get to that yellow and red. So I'm going to work pretty quickly here. I've got my big brush, doesn't have a whole lot of water on it, and I'm going to get just a big old glob of paint there. So hopefully you can see how big that glob of paint is. And then I'm going to work that around. I really am focused on covering the canvas. I don't really care if there's a bunch of weird brush strokes. Because once we mix it in with the yellow, it's going to make it a lot easier to sort of see where I've gone. All right, so going through here quickly, splattering paint everywhere, and of course it's an unfortunate color. Here we go. Okay, so the whole canvas, I'm going to go a little bit more here. Just trying to get through this part pretty quickly. The whole canvas has a thin-ish layer of white paint. I don't want to have too much paint on here because A, I want it to dry eventually, and B, I don't need a ton of sort of texture or brush strokes running through with this first part. So I've got the white down. Now before it dries, I'm going to take just a tiny little bit of yellow at a time, and I'm going to kind of work the yellow into the white. So I'm going to take just a tiny little bit of yellow, so just the tip into yellow. And you're always going to have a ton of paint on here at first. So I'm going to go through in a couple of spots, sort of swipe it around. Now I'm going to blend it. So the harder you push down, the more it's going to blend. And I want to come through here. I want to bring it out pretty close to the edges without making it one big solid color. So if you can tell, I'm sort of working my way around the canvas, doing kind of X-y shapes. And I'm just trying to push this paint around so that it's not one solid color in any one spot. So there is a lot of white on the outsides here. I'm gonna go ahead and bring that yellow out to the edges a little bit closer. There we go. Good. All right. So the big thing with this part is that I'm trying to put some yellow down and work it through. I want it to be a little more yellow right in the middle, and then it kind of drifts away into white. So what's going to happen next is I have a large brush and it's dirty. I want to make sure I don't have too much paint on it, so I'm just going to give a little swipe with my rag here. And then I'm going to take just a hint of red at a time, and I'm going to do that same thing that we just did with the white and yellow, but I'm going to keep it a little more controlled. I want there to be sort of a salmony red at the top and then at the bottom with just a hint on the sides. So I'm going to get just a little bit of red. I'm going to go just the tip again, but even more just the tip than before. And then because I don't want too much paint on here, I'm going to kind of tap a few times. So now you can tell I've sort of stained the top of my bristles. I don't have so much paint that you kind of can't see the bristles. So if you've got big old globs of paint, there's too much. Tap on your palette a few times. I'm going to come through here and I'm going to run right across the top because that's where I've got most paint on here. And now that it's not, I don't have a ton of paint on my brush, I'm going to do that little X-y shape. Starting from where it's red, I'm going to go down into the yellow and then back up to the red. So this is going to be my whole situation going all the way across the top. I'm kind of going down into the yellow, back up into that red, going down into the yellow and back. My biggest goal here is to make sure that it's not one solid color anywhere and there's not like a too harsh of a red. So I've got this almost pink salmon right across the top. When I do the bottom part, you can either go across the bottom like so, or if you've got like me and you've got the easel is kind of a pain in the butt, I'm going to do this fancy thing called flipping your canvas over, and we're going to go for it again. So every time I reload my brush, I'm going to go just a little bit of red, and then I'm dabbing on my palette here. I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to go right across the top here, and then I'm going to blend it in. There's a little bit of my background painting showing through. I'm going to go ahead and cover that. Here we go. So I really wanted to mix in, and it's kind of drying a little bit. So here's my trick for that. I don't have a ton of paint on my brush. I'm going to dip into my water just a little bit here. And then I'm always going to go onto my rag so I don't have any drips. And with just a damp brush, I can kind of bring some of that yellow back. And it'll work into that painting a lot easier with just a little bit of water on there. Great. I'm going to bring it down the sides just a little bit. Oh, it's helpful if I have paint on my brush. So I'm just going to kind of graze down this and do a little bit of a blend. Oh, wow. Okay. So my yellow is drying and I threw that red down and I got way too much water on my brush. So I'm going to give that a little swoop. I'm going back into it. So that little bit of water really does just change everything. It helps me push that paint around, gets into the little nooks and crannies. And if there's anything that's just a little bit dry underneath, it'll kind of bring that back so it blends in with that underneath color. So I'm going to flip this around again because I really want this to be the top. And I'm also trying to not mess up my easel here. There we go. And I'm also trying to get this edge without reaching over the canvas. I'm going to do this one more time. Oh, I got too much red. We'll give it a try anyway. Here we go. So I already know that my yellow is dry, so I'm going to go right into my water just a little bit, tapping on my paper towel or rag, and I'm going to soften or blend this edge here. All right, that's very nice. I'm really into this whole salmon yellow color right now, so this is really making me happy. All right, we've got our entire canvas is covered with either yellow, white, or red. In this case, it's sort of a pinky salmon color, but I've got a nice good start. This middle section might be a little bit yellow, so if you wanted to lighten it up, I'm gonna take just a hint of white and very lightly sort of work it in there just to kind of make it, it was really yellow in the middle, it's sort of all one color. So I'm just kind of breaking that up without trying to bring that yellow out too far. All right, so I've got my sky. It's got lots of fluffy little bits in there. I've got all sorts of colors going on down in here and off to the side. It starts out yellow in the middle and kind of drifts out to, I'm gonna say, a pinky salmon color. And I want to talk about clouds next. So the sky and the water are sort of, I'm going to say roughly right around the middle of the canvas is going to be our horizon line. I'm going to keep that in mind as I'm doing my clouds, but if it goes a little bit above or lower, your horizon line's wherever you want it to be, so don't stress out too much. I want to get to these clouds before my paint dries too much because I'm hoping, because I would like to do the clouds before the background dries so that hopefully some of that background color kind of comes through without it being a very stark white. So I've got my big brush. I've cleaned it out a little bit. I didn't really try super duper hard because I didn't have a ton of paint in my brush, but if you have a ton of paint in your brush, give your brush a nice good clean and dry it out. It's pretty dry. And I'm going to take some straight white. So anytime I do clouds, a lot of the time, because there's so many ways to do clouds, but across the bottom is a little more flat, and then across the top is always going to be just a little bit fluffy. So I'm going to take my big brush, just the edge of my brush. So if I hold it this way, it'll be better. Just the edge of my brush here is going to have some paint on it. And then anytime I'm trying something new, it's always best to do this fun thing called trying somewhere that doesn't matter. So I'm going to try off in this little edge. I just mentioned that about halfway up is going to be where my waterline is. So I want to make sure that my clouds are anywhere from the middle section and up. And then they can be on either side that you want. I like the idea of the clouds kind of rolling in. So that's why I'm going to put all three of my clouds sort of on the side here. You can do as many clouds as you want. I'm going to do 3 because it's what's in the picture down in the corner. So it makes me not have to think about it. I'm going to start off to the side here and keep it kind of small. I need more paint. There we go. Keep it kind of small, and then as I drift into the middle-ish section, I'm going to have this one drift a little bit farther than middle. I want it to sort of taper away to almost nothing. This is where that sort of, I've got an older brush, but those bristles sort of push outwards, so they're kind of frayed. So what I'm going to do is just use that little edge, and I'm just going to give it delicate little circles. All right, so I came from the outside, did little circles moving in, kept it kind of small, but now I want to go through and do what I call that finesse lap. So finesse lap, I'm going to come on through. I'm going to leave this corner because I don't want that to get any bigger. I'm going to start a little bit farther over and start to really fluff up that top of the cloud where I'm literally just doing circles here. There we go. So it's kind of flat on the bottom edge. It's real fluffy on top. I'm going to call that one good, and I'm going to move down just a little bit and do another one. So if that one ended there, I want to make sure that none of them end at the same spot. I think I'm going to have this one be a little bit longer. And it's going to go right off this way. So it's kind of a short straight line going that way. Now I'm going to do that bigger finesse where I'm trying to really get that top of the fluff cloud there. There we go. Because I ended almost the same there, I'm going to bring this one over just a little bit more. There we go. But yeah, all right, I'm going to do one more just for good measure. This one's going to be a little guy, just down over here. So starting from the end, I'm going to work my way in. I'm going to go just to where I can see the edge of that. There we go. And I want to make this end part just a little bit bigger. I'm going to call that the first part to our clouds. So the next part that I want to do is adding just a little bit of red on that bottom edge. When I do it though, I want it to be as wispy as possible. So I'm not going to rinse out my big brush. I'm just going to sort of wipe it off so I don't have too much of this color. And I'm going to get red again, just on those little frayed bristles there. And with that, I'm going to sort of do that same sort of roundy technique, but I'm only going to hit the very bottoms of it. So I'm going in just the edge of a couple of bristles here. And because I don't want too much, I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm just going to kind of tap on the edge so I don't have too much paint. So I'm just looking for bristle staining rather than like globby paint on there. And then I'm going to start off to the side here. I'm going to go right across the bottom doing these little upward, very light strokes. And I end up holding my breath. So again, a little bit more paint. Just these little upward flicks. And I'm holding my breath again. So the more times you go over these, the more it's going to kind of blend in. So if it gets really, really dark, you can kind of keep going over it, but hopefully you didn't put too much paint on your brush. The best thing to do is to load that corner of your brush, but then kind of tap on your palette. And that's going to make sure that it sort of disperses the paint across the tops of those bristles. It's also going to make sure you don't have big clods of it anywhere. So I'm going to do it again. I'm going to start out here, doing little round fluffies going in. I'm going to try to get them a little more controlled as I get into this little section here. There we go. I've got one more, just a little guy. So I'm going to try to get just some stuff that's not quite dry yet. Just a couple little bristles right across the end. There we go. Okay, so these clouds aren't done, but they're done for now. The thing is that we've got that bit of white that's hopefully blended into your background just a little bit. If it hasn't, it's no big deal. But then when we come back through, it's going to be one of the almost last things that we do. I'm going to do some white right across the top of my clouds. So I'm going to leave these for now. I'm going to let them dry. If I tried to go into it now with the paint being all wet still, it's going to just blend in and not make a nice stark white. So if you were looking for a time to take a break, now is the time. The next things that I want to do is decide on a horizon line and make our little hill or mountain range. And then we'll make that bottom section look like water before we put grass in. When we do the mountain range, it can be anywhere that you want it to be. So hopefully, if you're doing this on a big old long canvas, you've taken a break. Welcome back. I'm going to use my big brush to do the mountain range. Should I use the big brush? No, I think I'm going to use the small brush. Working on the fly here. So I've got my small brush. It's clean. I'm going to use blue paint. But what I want to do is water it down a little bit here. So I'm going to take a couple drops of water and a little bit of blue. And I'm really going to work that blue into the water. Like I'm trying to mix a new color. If you didn't mix it in all the way, you're going to get sort of drips of water going down. It's not the end of the world, but it's not what I want. So my horizon needs to be lower than my lowest cloud. And I think I'm going to go down just a little bit. So there's my lowest cloud. I'm going to go down about 2 fingers. And make a line. If you're nervous about making a line, I don't know if you saw what I did, but I sort of anchored my pinky down. And I do 1 fluid stroke all the way across. So don't do this a bunch of times because it's just going to make your line super big. It's going to go kind of all over the place. If you have a hard time making a straight line, a good thing to kind of keep in mind is you can always turn your canvas this way, and then your straight line will be a little more straight. I can see that it drifted off a little bit there. There we go. So you can go down if that's easier, because some people find it easier. So there's that. All right, I have my water line. That's now my horizon. I'm doing just a little more blue and water mix here. And I'm going to darken this in so you can really see it. There we go. Now I need mountains. Mountains are a lot of fun as long as you don't overthink it. So what I'm going to do is start from one end and sort of jiggle my hand going all the way across. I don't want to have zigzags, and I don't want to have just like, what's it called? Scalloped top. So I'm going to start over here, making a knot pattern. I'm going to go all the way across. These hills are not super duper big. I'm going to make that one go up that way. So the reason that I made this one a little bit higher is because I don't want this end and that end to end at the same spot. Lots of ends. So once you got your line in there, I'm going to switch back to regular blue paint. I'm going to go ahead and just quickly fill this in. I don't really care so much about the straight line because we're about to put water in, but I'm really kind of trying to focus on the top of my hill or mountain range, getting that a little more of a clean line. So all the way through here, bam. There we go. Now I've got a mountain range. So now I've got this weird block of salmon-y color and then a sky and a mountain range. We're gonna make this look like water now with my big brush and blue paint. So I'm throwing my little brush in the water, grabbing my big brush, which I already cleaned out, but it's not very dry. So I'm gonna go ahead and dry it off a little bit here. And then what I wanna do is take a little bit of blue paint at a time. There's some water still on my brush, so if I kind of squeeze it out, I've got a thing underneath me here. You can see some water kind of coming out. It's not insanely dry is all I'm going for here. So with my blue paint and large brush, I've got, oh, almost dropped my water there. I've got my blue. I'm going to start from the outside. I'm going to flick of the wrist going in. Starting on the bottom is just nice. And then I want to bring it in. I want it to be a little more transparent than solid, so that one there might need to be worked out a little bit. There we go. Because what's going to happen next is I'm going to have that grass that kind of comes through, and that's also going to be blue. So if this one's a little bit less thick, it's going to make that grass kind of pop out a little bit. As I was talking, I realized I'm sort of stopping everything at the same spot, and I don't want that. So I'm going to drag just a few of these a little bit farther. So now it doesn't just end in one sort of section, it sort of drifts around there. I'm going to do it again. So I've got just a little bit of blue paint at a time. I'm starting from the edge here and I'm coming in. Oh, that was a little not straight, so I'm going to kind of correct that. There we go. And then I want to make sure that it's not all ending at the same spot. So let's drift around here. Great. Lovely. I'm going to start noodling on this. So I'm going to call it good before I noodle. So now I know where my water is. Doesn't look the best, but while this lower section sort of dries a little bit, why don't we move back up and finish those clouds out? So I am going to use my small brush again, and we were just using blue. It's not so hard to rinse out blue because it's kind of a thinner paint, or at least mine is. So I'm just going to go ahead and scrub. And then I'm always going to dry this off, and I've gotten used to always kind of grabbing it up by the metal and the wood just in case you've got a ton of water up by your handle. That way it doesn't run down your arm when you're trying to paint. So I've got a very clean and fresh small brush. I'm going to go into white, And with white, I'm gonna do these very short little roundy strokes across the top of my cloud. So what's gonna happen is it's gonna lighten up the top of the cloud. It's also gonna give it sort of a sharper edge. So let's start somewhere that doesn't matter, right over here. And as I work around, I'm doing these little sort of sea-like strokes. And every so often, I might decide, oh, here's a nice big lump of just real fresh cloud. Just to kind of change up that silhouette of the cloud so it's not super tapered like that. All right, so I've got that front cloud. Well, it's front right now, but what I want to do is I'm going to bring this middle cloud in front of that one. So I'm going to take this little section here. I'm going to go right over the lowest part of that first cloud we did. Just give it a new little top here. So now this middle cloud, or the second cloud, it's in front. Every so often, this one here, I'm going to bring it down a little bit just to make sure that it's not the exact same. Going across. See, I like how that was super bright right on the end, so I'm going to do that over there too. All right, last one. I want this one to stay behind it, so I'm not going to touch the bottom of that second cloud. I'm just going to start this third cloud where you can see it, and then I might bring this one out just a little farther with that white, just to give it that extra, like it's super bright right there. Okay, let's move on. Do one more little thing or I'm going to start noodling. So we've got our clouds. I'm going to call those done. They're nice and fluffy. You can tell where there's the highlight on the top and then it's got that little bit of shading underneath. We can bounce back down into our water. So our water's going to take one more thing, but I'm going to use my small brush. So I'm going to go ahead and clean this out. Okay, so I want to streak blue paint into my river or lake, whatever I'm calling it. So I'm going to take my small brush. I'm going to get just a little bit of paint. I'm not worried about if I have too much or not. As long as it's not dripping off of your brush, it's fine. And then I'm going to hold my brush a little more parallel to my canvas and just give it these light little strokes. So I'm not pushing down very hard. Trying not to make a pattern, so I don't want too much. And they're sort of straight. I'm going to do a couple of long ones, little short ones, and then I'm going to move on before I start noodling. All right. So I want a few of them that come right through this middle section. All right. If you are not super keen on this whole streaking thing, don't do it. It's not super important on the scale of things to do. I would really worry about the clouds, the sky, the mountain range, and then what we're about to do now, which is the grass. So the grass blades. I'm going to do at least 3 grass blades on each side. And I want to water down some blue for this too. So I'm going to take a little more water and just thin out some of my, just a little section of my blue paint here. And when I do the grass, you can always revisit a blade, but when I first set down where it's gonna be, I'm gonna do one fluid stroke and then move on. And then I'll go back through and sort of finesse the thickness and thins after I get all my placement down. So this first run is placement. I wanna make sure a few of these kind of go above the mountain range, and maybe 1 or 2 that stay below the mountain range. So it's always nice to start somewhere that doesn't matter. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start on one of these over here. So let's see, I want you to see the top. So I'm going to start off with the canvas down at the bottom and I'm going to go up and this one curves that way. That's it. That's all I'm doing to that one for now. I'm going to move over. I want one that does not go above my mountain range. So I'm going to start off the bottom and do a little curve to that one. And because both of those are curved, I'm going to do one more that's a little straighter. Yeah, that's all right. All right, so I'm going to move over and I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm starting off the canvas. I just want to make sure that they're not the exact same. So I'm going to have this one a little bit closer and it's going to come in and do just a little bit of a drip. The next one, let's go ahead, let's make this one the biggest one there is. So we'll kind of snake that up just a little bit. And this one has 3, and I always want everything to be a little bit asymmetrical. So I'm gonna do 2 more here. I'm gonna do one that's just a little guy. And let's do another one that's over here but crosses over that. So now I've got 3 on this side and 4 over here. They all look like they're the same blade of grass, just in different positions. So what I want to do now is thicken out a few of them. I want to clean up the tips of the grass blades, and then I'll leave some of them just the way they are. So the ones that I'm going to leave the way they are is maybe this straight one and maybe that little curved one. But this one here, so I want to kind of clean up that end. So what I want to do is reload my brush. I'm going to get a little bit of straight blue, and with the delicatest hand I can, I'm going to start just a little farther down and then go up that blade of grass a little bit until my hand just sort of drifts away. So I'm pushing down a little bit, and as I go up my blade of grass, I'm going to lift my hand up a little bit, and that very end one, you can do a little flick of the wrist. And then I'll come down here and thicken that little blade of grass out a little. There we go. Now it's not the same blade. Moving over, I'm going to do the same thing. So this one over here needs a little bit of a touch up. There we go. That one's a little thicker. With that one, I started with the tip. So before I said to start down a little bit lower and then sort of flick of the wrist going up, and that's going to help you do small corrections. If you want to remake the whole tip, I'm going to start from the very top and not touch the canvas. I'm using my pinky as an anchor, and I'm going to go down. So I go down that stalk, I'm going to push down a little bit harder. So I'm off the canvas, I'm starting to drift down, I've touched the canvas, and I'm going to start pushing down harder. And this is the biggest blade of grass, so I'm going to make it just a little bit thicker here. There we go. If you're nervous about trying this technique or any of the other techniques, try it on just a scratch piece of paper first. So I've got my brush, my small brush. I'm going to thicken in a few of these by starting just a little bit lower than where I think I'm going to go, and then I'm going to go up and do those little small corrections to get the ends that I like. So there's 2 ways you can go there. You can start off of the canvas on the bottom of the blade of grass and go up and little flicks of the wrist. Or you can start right on the top of that blade of grass with just the lightest little touch. And then as you work your way into that blade of grass, push down a little bit harder. So whatever works for you, no big deal. Either way. And here you have it. It's an adorable little serene lake. I keep wanting to call it a sunset, but you don't actually see the sun setting anywhere. So it's just a serene view of a lake. If you wanted to throw any extra little things in there, like you could put that little Emerald Island and now it's Lake Tahoe. You can put in palm trees and now it's the ocean. You can add little birds, all the things. So if you wanted to add anything but don't know what to add, let me know in the comments, or just message me on Facebook or Instagram and I'll give you any tips. As long as you're willing to try to paint and having a good time with it, I want to help you move forward. So let me know how I can do that. If you want to see me do any more of these, I do have a PayPal me. It is now, this is basically my job. So if you want to see more of these happen, I am accepting tips and donations to my PayPal me. Anything helps. $1 is going to be so helpful to me, you don't understand. But if you donate $10 or more, I did make a coloring book. It's not going to get printed, everything going on, it's just not going to happen. But if you donate $10 or more, I have 14 pages on a PDF, that's coloring book, full of dogs and cats as mermaids. There's a few other little things in there. But it's just a lot of fun. Just a good time, a good coloring thing. If you've got multiple kids, one PDF, you can print out as many as you want. If you have multiple use, I've colored this maybe 3 or 4 times. I think I posted one. If you want to see more of the cats and dogs as mermaids, you can donate or tip, whatever we're calling it these days, to my PayPal me. $10 or more will get you that PDF. Also helps me move along with these, so hopefully I'll do a couple more. If there's anything specific that you want to know, let me know. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time.